Good morning.
Hey Mark,
I'm gonna.
I thought I was in the wrong room for a second because I was first. That's
Oh,
unusual.
yeah. I was making a couple of last minute edits of a document I was about to share, so didn't join right on time. Hi, Dan. Dan, I don't remember you in this forum. That could be just my bad memory. Could you remind us who you are?
Oh, yes. Hi. I recently joined, I was appointed the technical contact at our company, Adera. We work on secure runtime, and we're doing some research on Spinfy Spire workload
Mhm.
identity. So just wanted to
Oh,
listen in and see how
fantastic.
we can.
Yeah, I actually have I was talking to someone yesterday about an idea I had about how to perhaps make the um, SPIFFE integration a little easier. You are aware of the problems we're having with Whimsy, right? Specifically.
Sorry, I think I have some connection issue. I lost you there for
Oh,
about the
are
last
you
seven
aware of
seconds.
the architectural issues we're having with Whimsy in this working group?
No, not yet.
Okay, so while we're waiting for a few more folks to show up, let me bring you up to speed. So Whimsy generally does not talk about credential acquisition. It deals primarily with credential format, credential usage, service to service protocol, all of that stuff. But it does uh, dip its toes into how credentials are issued by specifying that there's going to be an agent, and right, and that the uh, workload is supposed to contact the agent to get the credential, and the agent gets it from the server. And then you go to SPIFFE, and the SPIFFE has this workload API, and the workload API is parameterless. And so what you happen under SPIFFE is the node assists, and the agent runs on the node, and the agent is then basically trusted to contact the server on the workload's behalf and get the credential to the workload. The problem with confidential computing, the node is not trusted. And the agent cannot be shared between multiple workloads because unless the agent is in TCP of each workload, right? And as a result, what you see is then parameterless workload API essentially means that there is no way to supply a quote to an agent to forward to verify. So that's your problem. And the thought I was having is like the way it works on AWS, for instance, the workload contacts the agent, and the agent gets information about the workload from the metadata service, Amazon metadata service, right? And basically says, well, I can identify the workload, I guess, by the way the workload connects to the agent. So out of band to the workload API. So it's not a parameter in band with the API, but it's out of band, something having to do with the connection between the two, right? And then because of that, it can know that's that workload. So I can go access the metadata for the workload, and then I can basically issue credential to that workload because I trust the metadata service to tell me this thing about the workload, right? So I was thinking of the workload API is something like gRPC. Maybe there is, and again, this is where Mark starts talking potentially out of his ass, so that disclaimer. Um, Maybe there is a way for the agent to identify the workload as basically the gRPC client. And maybe there is a way under gRPC to put a piece of information into the shared memory, such that the agent could retrieve it. And then the agent could retrieve what would be effectively a quote out of the workload and go procure credentials for the workload that way. Anyway, that's something I was going to prototype, but if you're in that space, and you can prevent me from wasting a lot of time, that would be nice. Anyway, so let's see. Another participant here. I see A. Romanovna. Hi, A.
Hi, Alex. Nice to meet you.
Hi. What is it, Alex?
Yes, Alex or Alexandra.
Hi. Nice
I
to meet you,
worked,
Alexandra. Would you introduce yourself, please?
I worked in at Intel on confidential computing, so joining in to see how I can help or contribute. But
Oh, awesome. Well, welcome. Hi. Thank you. Well, okay, so let's see. I'm going to start by, as usual, what I do is um, I share my screen, and we're going to. start. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat. So let's see, where is the screen that I want to share? Apologies, I'm still waking up. It's 6 a.m. on the oh, there it is. This is the window I want to share. It's 6 a.m. on the West Coast where I live, so it's a little early for me. Okay, so the first link I'm going to put in the chat is going to be the link to the meeting minutes. And you can go and add yourself to the list if you haven't already. And the next thing I'm going to put in the chat is a link to the reference architecture document on which we'll be working today. So here you go. So the reference architecture document has undergone a pretty significant revision since last time we talked, in part because I brought a bunch of content into there from our informational draft that we presented at the ATF, and a whole bunch of diagrams. So there was a little bit of editorial and just a lot of just content dumped into it that we broadly agree on. There is now a very nice table of contents, so now we know that the document is over 20 pages long. And uh, uh, let me see. I want to go back to some of the topics. I want to talk, and for that, I want to wait for the folks like Yogesh and Henk, our main IETF contacts in the RATS working group, to join us here to talk about the next steps of the IETF. But one of the things I wanted to discuss today was the entity relationship diagram that should be in our reference architecture, because we should understand how the various concepts we define relate to each other. And then I wanted to talk a bit about how we're going to move forward on provenance, because this is the one thing we haven't touched yet. And then whatever else comes to mind. You can check the email I sent with the agenda. I think I missed. There is sorry. I sent a few additional ideas to the mailing list. So a quick recap of the reference architecture. So other than the really nice content table, I started a section in the beginning with use cases. And I think we should be very clear about the use cases that the reference architecture addresses. This is not a closed list. There may be others. So one of the things that we might consider talking about, and I do not know, it will be the discussion that results and whether we do this or not, but our identity is routable effectively. How does identity relate to things like reverse proxies and proxies of various kinds, where you're not talking to the ultimate destination, hi Mike, but you're talking to some intermediary. So that would be one thing to discuss, if maybe it belongs in the reference architecture, maybe it doesn't. I don't know yet, but it keeps coming up. Certainly when you talk to a workload, then you need to know that your request goes to a trusted place. We got some background noise. Sorry, Mike. I think it's coming from.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I've got work.
All right, thank you. And another thing I was thinking about discussing whether it belongs in the reference architecture would be stuff related to machine learning. What is the identity of a model? And how do you know the provenance of the model, etc. And again, this cannot be that one cannot be specific to confidential computing. We need something that is universal. But at the same time, if it is reflected in our reference architecture somehow, in terms of either identity or how attestation is done, it may end up deserving a mention. I don't know this yet. So, but the use cases definitely are that the credentials issued to Workload need to be industry standard. So we need to synchronize with outside efforts such as Whimsy. And I'm no longer saying it's going to be just Whimsy. It could be anything else that can supply an identity to Workload. So, like Manu, Hashmesh, right? So it would be nice to exercise a use case to see how the two impedance match. Then we need to talk about how to do stable identifiers for workloads. So that's sort of introduction, or interaction with rats with remote attestation, because through no fault of ours, remote attestation doesn't give us stable identities today, and this is what the IETF conversation was all about. And finally, establishing utilizing provenance. Right now I just have placeholders there, but it would be nice to formulate these use cases / set them out a little bit more fully, so that we know that the architecture must meet, the use cases. Requirements already documented. We can always revisit, but you'll find a hyperlink to our requirements doc. I encourage folks to review it periodically because, again, the field evolves and more requirements will, or maybe the requirements are no longer good the way they are. I haven't done that in a few weeks. I should probably go back. All right. Again, right now I'm just doing a recap of the architecture. I drew this little diagram that basically says, well, we're in the middle of several efforts. One is attestation, another is credentials, and the third one is provenance. Again, feel free to challenge this, but we do need to, in our reference architecture, interact with outside efforts without repeating them. So, for instance, when we talk about attestation of complex workloads that span trust execution environments, or maybe have like hierarchical relationship between various attestations. So that is done under the complex attestation effort in RATs. We should not be repeating it here. We should basically saying, when you attest through RATs, you get back a credential. We should not be dealing with that here. That would be a layering violation. Similarly, we need to make sure that outside efforts around establishing credentials for workloads are also compatible with confidential computing, make them trustworthy. And this is where, if Whimsy doesn't exactly do what we need, then we need to work with Whimsy and hopefully influence them to make their efforts compatible. So again, it's a layering violation for us to incorporate Whimsy into our work, but we need to work with them. And then we haven't really talked about provenance much, but we should. And this is one of the things I was hoping to discuss today. But again, so recapping. There's a bunch of assumptions that stayed. This is the other thing I was hoping to start today, is review this, and then I can make it into a picture. We have various entities that we're defining, but those entities have relationships between them. We should talk about how they relate to each other. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, so provenance. I wonder whether that's our problem. I mean, we need to be able to have an identity that we know that's come from somewhere. I agree. And it might be that we want to have a way, that other people might want to have a way of tying that to provenance. And if there is such a way of doing so, we should definitely incorporate it. But I wonder whether provenance should be within our purview, or just something we accept if it's there, or whether if there's nothing like that at the moment, we should be pushing for it, which may be what you're thinking of.
Well, so let's talk about that. So if you actually look at this comes down to our charter and the scenarios. So I can pull up those documents, we can review them, or you can look at your own. But what you'll find is it, much like in the real world where you deal with someone's identity, right? So, somebody may be crossing a border and presenting a passport to you, and the passport may be very valid, right? So here is a citizen of Albania that is trying to enter your country with a valid visa, or maybe you have a visa-free regime, whatever. Provenance would effectively see how do we connect to a system that may tell you additional things about this individual, so you can decide at the admission point whether you want to grant access or not. And it is clear that the credential will not carry all of that information, maybe actually a whole lot of it, right? So, and that's why we felt that provenance is in scope. Now, again, we are not going to be specifying necessarily how provenance is expressed. This is where quorum comes in, Much like we say we need attestation, but we don't say exactly how attestation is done for a complex scenario, etc. But we know that there is a reference architecture around attestation, and that includes a verifier, and maybe we need to go to a verifier, right? So I think your challenge to including provenance is valid. And I think we just need to, if we decide to remove it and say we like, there is nothing about trustworthiness of an identity that deals with provenance in any way, shape, or form. Okay, well, then we won't. But something tells me that the moment you say my identity is trustworthy, you want to know something about
Yeah, I
what led to
agree.
the establishment of that trust.
I agree with that, but I'm not sure that that's relevant to the confidential computedness of the TWI. I think anyone doing that would feel the same. And the fact that we can, that we're in a position where uh, it is relevant to us is fine. But I don't think there's anything about our CC'edness that gives us particular purview over it.
Yes and no.
This is the in any case where you're accepting an identity, you want to be clear as to the endorsement or the authority behind that, the assertions around that identity, and how are we different? I think is
Well, okay, so that's a good question. The way I would answer it is there is something specific about confidential computing that makes provenance certainly easier, and that's attestation. Your workload was not just assigned provenance, it was able to prove it.
You can make
so for instance, there is nothing
you carry things through, yes.
Manu?
Yeah, actually, Mike, this is our work showed us that confidential computing is in fact the only way to have a truly, how to say that, truly independent from any other entities, right? But an identifier and an identity, the root of trust for a given entity to serve as the anchor to then build a digital twin of that entity in a way that is inherently verifiable. The way, and in fact, I presented it. I think it was Mark. Was it within? I think yeah. There's one of the videos of the previous sessions where I presented the analysis of the thing. The idea of saying, okay, if you have an identifier space that is administered by somebody, then that somebody has inherent authority over the identifier space. And so somebody can mess with the identifiers and the relationship between identifiers and identities. And so if you want to trace provenance of anything, you need an identifier space that does not have that implicit authority that administers the identifier space. What confidential computing gives us is the ability to create random identifiers within a confidential computing environment. So the identifiers and the identifier space that you just specify as, generate random identifiers that are confidential at generation, at genesis. That gives you exclusive, universally unique roots of trust for to bootstrap the chaining for provenance use cases. And that's exactly what we do in our infrastructure. And in fact, if you remove either of these things, if you say, I'm not going to create random identifiers, then obviously it means that it's administered somehow because you need to eliminate collisions. Or if you say, I'm going to create random identifiers, but not within a trusted execution environment, then of course those identifiers can be copied, can be, spoofed, and then you can have, malicious spoofing of those identifiers. So confidential computing is in fact inherently unique in creating.
I disagree with that. Now, I agree that it's probably the only easy way of doing it at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that it is the isolation attestation um, double tuple that we care about, and that you could do, for instance, the same with HSMs if you tried really hard. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying that anyone's doing it at the moment, but I can imagine other types of isolation attestation tuple mechanisms that would allow it. And I don't want to be claiming something which is a byproduct of the capabilities we have just because we're the only people who can do it at the moment.
But
We can also protect data and use with armed guards, right?
Right.
But that we're still looking at remote attestation RATS style. So
and Mike, I agree with you with the HSM use case, but if you add attestation to an HSM and then you enable other cryptographic, if the HSM is just creating or just doing the basic, signing and verifying type stuff, if it
Yeah, no, but
then
you can do
uh,
partly generalized compute within an HSM. I mean, I know people generally use them in a particular way, but there are programmable HSMs, and
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
is
So,
what use
so,
case.
so I would include then in my bold claim, indeed, if there's an HSM that can do general compute and that can be attested, right, per the attestation mechanism of the CCC, I would actually include them in the categories of TEEs that have the capabilities that are necessary for the genesis of provenance, essentially.
I'm not talking generic computation, but I am talking about programmable HSMs. Let's not get too bogged down to it.
Got it.
I just think we need to be careful about claiming something that we don't need to be ours just because we're currently the only people who can do it. I think we have a danger of designing something in that shouldn't be designed in. Now, provenance is absolutely very important, but really what we want to say is we need to be sure that the identity that we've accepted is one that we trust. Provenance is one way of doing that. It's maybe not the only way of doing it. But what we're saying is we need to be able to
so
trust that
Mike,
and pass on the reason we have established that trust to the next party in the chain. I think that's what we're saying, right?
and that may be all there is, right? That may be all there is, but it needs a mention. So, for instance, specifically to the second part, where you said you need to pass it on. Uh, I may very much trust someone to say, you reasonably believe this workload to be, a particular application. But then this application comes to you and says, actually, I would like to transfer $1 billion to an offshore account. Provenance comes in specifically at the point where you say, you just triggered an additional check on my part and I need access to additional information. And the reference architecture might simply say, here is a menu of choices for how a recipient of an identity might go about obtaining the additional information, or how an auditor might, check on whether the credential were issued in accordance with policy after the fact, right? So we need not be prescriptive. So by the way, with the way we're talking about how we interact with rats, we're also not prescriptive. We're saying here's a menu of choices.
Okay, I want to dig into that particular use case. I'm sorry, if you're going to give me use cases, I'm going to dig into them. So, and in that case, let's say Manu is the next party, right? And you are the confidential computer, the TE, and I am the establishing provenance blah, right? So Manu says to you, I want to transfer $1 billion, right? Is that what's happening?
Sure.
Okay. And so whose responsibility is it now to check? And what are we checking? I'm not clear who's checking what here.
So you may check things. So let me put it this way. Not all access checks are equally, cheap. Some, you may say, so here, like a typical bank scenario is there is some number we are willing to lose to fraud every day, because we, do not want to exercise minute control over
We
all
can keep that
things.
risk profile. Yeah, sure.
Right. So there is, and it's actually when you transact trillions of dollars a day, like we do, It's a surprisingly large number. Uh,
All right.
Now, that said, if somebody is trying to do something that exceeds a certain risk threshold, uh, mechanisms that kick in to ensure that you are not gonna lose a lot of money may very well be more expensive, right? So you will see that, by the way, in most situations, right? So
Yeah,
if
no,
you want to
I 100% agree. What I don't understand is who the onus is to do the checking. In your
Usually, well,
example,
I
I
would
didn't
say the
understand
relying
it.
party, right? The relying party may want to look at the credential and say, "Hold on a second, you're trying to, you're falling outside the risk profile. Your behavior is starting to get
Okay, right, all
suspicious."
right, and that's good. Now, who is going to delve deeper and check that? Is it relying party or is it me?
I would imagine that
Or
that's the
is it
relying party.
the CC? In which case, it's not the business of the TE to know anything about it or do anything about it. 'Cause it's a relying party.
Well, it's not the business of the T. The T was able to perform attestation. The T collected evidence. The T went to the verifier. The T submitted the evidence, and uh, the verifier may have kept information around the bill of material of the T, right? And it's not going to send that massive thing together with the credential. Maybe there is additional information that went into, there is a log of some policy decision that went into all of this stuff. And the relying party may go to we talked about provenance effectively being a breadcrumb of some sort uh, uh, in the credential. And so follow that breadcrumb back to the issuer or to some other place and say, let me dig a little deeper. Let's say, has this identity been involved in other suspicious activities, or like just go do God knows what. There's a whole bunch of
So
things they could do.
what we're really talking about here is how the agency in that's in the TE is reflected. It's just the binding, how strong that's not how strong the binding is. It's then
Yes, it is. It's
we're assuming that the binding is strong. We now need just to check the original endorsement or the
We may,
identity.
there could be, yeah.
it's all the bindings, it's all the bindings between all the pieces of information, be they endorsement values, attestation, results or evidence. You have to make a decision. You're going to evaluate a series of pieces of information, and the provenance of all these pieces of information must themselves be, strongly bound, so that when you make a
Yeah,
decision,
but
you have
at some
assurance.
point you're going to say, I'm going to go out of band, right? I can't trust the TE to give me this information. I need to go out of band.
Correct, correct. So it is, and this is why it's also connected to the concept of composite attestations or composite verifiers, and it's also linked to the idea. I mean, the billion-dollar use case is great because I'd like to have $1 billion, but the I think the one that's also interesting is if you think about a crime scene and you have evidence on the crime scene, and then you have the tribunal or the courts, and you need to have provenance, and you need to have the chain of custody when the evidence is being moved from the crime scene to the courts, and that is the sequence of steps. So it's really about chaining, and in those chains of custody, you need to have assurance that every single link in the chain is verified to your level of assurance
And
that
I
you're
agree with
seeking.
that. I think the question I have is it in our purview to decide what types and how strong the chains are backwards? And I'm not
We're not deciding.
forward, yes.
We're not deciding. I think the idea here is to say, if you want to reach this is a reference architecture, right? It's basically saying this is what you can do with confidential computing. That's what that's what confidential computing enables. And then of course you can always relax requirements if you are in some environments that you can't verify, where you have to increase your trust. Then fine, you're just going to say that breaks the model, but now you know that you have degraded the security model, and at the same time you've presented what can be done and what the ideal, what the North Star is. So I think that we're not saying that everybody and everything has to be this way.
Let's drop this for now. When we get to something more concrete, I think I'm going to be in a better position to argue or not with it. So we spent enough time on this. Really interesting. Thanks, guys. Let's drop it for now. I think, unless
Well,
you guys want.
that's the thing. We should probably define the use cases, and then we should see if we can agree on how the reference architecture might reflect them. And if we find that there is nothing architectural about them, then maybe worth dropping. So, I'm keeping this as an open issue for now. I would encourage a conversation on the
Yeah, sure.
on the mailing list. Now that we have Yogesh and Hank here, hello both. Hank was here, and then there he is.
Hello.
Okay, so there is something I wanted to discuss with you, and did want to discuss until you joined. So there was this presentation at the IETF, and we talked about specifically the necessity for stable workload identities, and the fact that RATS doesn't have this relying party empathy, that if you follow RATS charter and the ARF-RSI and other things, that you effectively issue claims to a workload that every time the workload changes or the hardware changes, that the firmware is updated or whatever, your relying party needs to be aware of this. This is brittle, unmanageable, undeployable. So we said all these things. What is the next step with the IETF? There has not been any sort of email discussion. There was a lot of discussion of other issues, but not of this draft. But I wanted to understand what does the future of our work with IETF look like now that there'll be IETF 125. Do we push for the adoption of this draft? Have you heard anything? Just wanted to hear from you.
Yeah, you're right, Mark, that there was a bit of silence in the RATS community for that. What we can do is there are two aspects to this. I see that we should take a feedback from the chairs on the mailing list to see that do you see the work valuable, and we really want to get this adopted. So can you please engage with the community to get this adopted? That's one track. That would be a good possible
So is
next
that
step.
an email to Ned Smith? Who else?
Yeah, the
Who's
RATS
going to
hyphen
send
chairs.
it?
Yeah.
Is Hank one of the chairs? Like, I don't even know what the structure there is.
No. The Hank is not the chair.
So
No.
there's an email alias. It is rats-chairs@itf.org. So then this is a function alias for the current chairs. So you don't have to know them. You have to know the name of the working group, and then everything is like a naming convention. First of all, sorry, hello for being late. I've been, I think, 50 minutes late again. The overflows accumulate over the day, and I'm very sorry for that. And I heard an initial question, and to be honest, I didn't get the question about the IETF. It was about the silence in the room.
Well, it's simply we did this presentation. We presented the idea, and then the question is, what's next?
Yeah.
Like, we talked about wanting the RATS working group to adopt this draft or move forward somehow. But now that they heard the pitch, I want to know what are the next steps.
Typically, really useful is to understand who will be in support. Like you have like a known number of supporters that they're really separate, like not a cohort of basically the same thing, but different stakeholders, and you can count on them to support the work and want to work on the work in the open in the IETF. So if you have knowledge about such a stakeholder group, I think you're golden for a working group of adoption in general. In the specifica of the RATS working group, the RATS chairs have issued some very curious adoption stop right now because not enough items are moving out of the working group. So this is basically to extort review. I want to say somehow leverage reviews from working group participants on adoptive work, which has happened a lot. So I think at least 2 items already are moving out, 2 are about to move out because of the review action. So to get things adopted, I think some of it is just a time issue until other things move out. But that should not stop us from writing internet draft text. I think the IETF works on published documents and informing the working group via the email list that things have been updated. And where we discuss how to do things, like an energetic discussion like here, we do it on the list, some of it, or repeat some findings on the list. Like if we have a heated discussion here, we should replay some of it to the list. So we're at a call. We should invite everybody to this call. We know it's not adopted work, but a lot of people are already joining. Like advertise this time here, for example,
Mhm.
on the list. So if you want to join. And then if we push an update to the ID, it is an individual ID, and the working group does not get a notification. If so, whenever a update to the ID is submitted to the data tracker, you take that email. Some of the authors takes that email, replies to forward that email to the working group list, and says, "Hi, we just added these features. We just changed these items. We are curious how our policy would fit in this, whatever." Right? So, and put some topics of discussions that we have here again to the list, and that is creating visibility. And if we are starting to discuss the items raised on the list, not only here in the meeting, then people can participate better, see the topic discussed, and that will in the end raise awareness and interest. So I think that's the typical way of promoting, so to speak, work in the IETF. That before you ask for adoption, you create some dialogue on the list.
Right. I hear you. Here's my concern with that approach. So looking at this diagram, right? So this trustworthy workload identity basically has three thrusts, rats, and that's what we just discussed. There is the credentials. So how do credentials get expressed? So like Whimsy talks about the Whimsy standard, there is Spiffy, whatever, and the whole interaction there. And finally, provenance, which was the heated discussion just up until now. And if we spend our time, wrestling Whimsy to do something or figuring out what to do with provenance, the subject of rat's interaction effectively stays dormant, right? So we are making progress as a working group, but we're not making progress with respect to rats saying, look, we got to get our shit together to make workload identity, deployable by large customers, which is effectively what I'm hoping to accomplish, right? And
Mhm.
if you actually look through the interaction diagrams later, it's like all this text here is actually fairly high quality, right? I mean, we can do perhaps some security analysis on it, make sure to, identify if there are any bugs that crept in. It's possible to perhaps do some prototyping and, share a GitHub repo saying, okay, we tried it with this verifier, we tried it with that verifier, we tried it with Verizon, we tried this and that, right? But, uh, you know, one, I believe, can take a look at these interaction diagrams and go start implementing them today. See what I mean?
Mm.
And but like I don't want to do buzz for sake of buzz.
Yeah, okay, no, you're right. Just as a precursor to adoption, jumping. So we presented more. So we presented, and there was a lot. Like we had like 20 slides. There was a lot in there. The
Mhm.
diagrams. Well, it's hard to read them on a screen. Some
Right,
people are doing this simultaneously remote. So I always have it on screen. I can read them, but I think most of the people just then listen. And
right.
this is okay. So now we I don't know another way how to precursor an adoption without a discussion, unless there is wide agreement to adoption on the list.
Mhm.
And again, that would be hey, we have talked about this a little bit. We at least made visible advances on an internet draft, which would, for example, require us to do the work to convert these to ASCII art. And that is already a little bit, I want to say, tight, but it's possible because a lot of these arrow names are very wordy. But you can number them, and they can find the numbers in the below the sequence diagram. But typically, some kind of text on arrows is better. And then we can just say, hi, we updated this, we did this, and hey, we updated this and we did this. We do one or two iterations on, and then literally when items have moved out, we could ask for an adoption if something put off. But maybe it's better to ask for adoption earlier, just with after some visibility that we update individual drafts, forward that to the list at least at the minimum, not creating a dialogue, not a buzz, but just updates on how the document is faring. And then we would have stakeholders at hand that could plus one that. But if only stakeholders suddenly appear that have never made it on the list again, this looks a little bit artificial. So they can't know that we are meeting, for example. So I would advertise this meeting here maybe on at least on the list. Well, does that make sense? That is not also creating buzz, but it's
Can I jump in, Mark?
sure,
If I
sure.
may. So, having spent some time doing standards bits and pieces in a rather different forum, but I've been in the position I think that Hank's looking at it from the other direction. They work together, and suddenly some people come with a huge clump of information, which is difficult to process if you haven't looked at it before, and they don't. Standards bodies are built partly to guard against random people coming up with a whole bunch of things to try and implement it without just for their own purposes, right? And clearly that's not what we're doing. But standards bodies, their processes are built to try to mitigate against that. So what I think Hank is suggesting is that if we can grab some people who are going to support the process, and B, give some clumps of information that are maybe easier to understand on their own, and do that with 2 or 3 things, and then say, look, it all fits together. It's going to be easier to take it through. It's not for for its own sake. It is to give people a chance to digest some of this stuff, which, yes, we've digested, but we need to help them digest it as well. Is that fair, Hank? Is that a way of looking at it?
That is a fair comment, especially this gateway function you described, basically shielding the working group from this kind of bulk support ad hoc. So that is not how it works. So yeah, again, minimal things, visibility, not creating necessarily artificial buzz. That's not what I'm talking about. It has to be either real discussion on a topic you're using as a discussion space, or at least visibility of updated documents, because that's how people review and operate on. If there's an ID, people read it. If it's a Google Doc document, if there's a meeting, people might join. So I forgot to initiate, but I think Michael Richardson initiated a meeting on complex scenarios for remote attestation, and it is very well visited. I'm actually really happy that so many attendees there, and we could advertise we can open up our meeting here too. And advertise.
And it doesn't even need to be every meeting. We could say we're going to have a particular meeting to deal with the stuff which is relevant to this particular group. Yeah. And do that a couple of times.
One every 4 weeks or whatever, I don't know.
I would like to move into sort of a suggestion phase of, what could we do concretely? So, I mean, one idea I heard was, take another path through the informational draft, perhaps put numbers on interactions and create additional content clarifying what is being done in each interaction. Okay, so it may be a small change, but it may aid in readability. But I still like to my mind, the countdown to the next ITF has started, and given that they're 4 months apart, and then there is sort of a lockdown towards the end, and we're now 2 weeks past ITF, we now have 3 months, right? With holidays inserted in the middle somewhere, so really 2.5, right? So in the next 2.5 months, ideally there would be something presented, the next version perhaps of this informational draft to ETFs to keep it alive. But what
Yes,
is
but
that?
let's get people here as well, and present small bits of information that can be digested more easily, to help that along, help sweeten the pill, or give them something to drink. I don't know.
Okay, what would that be? And I'm just running a little bit
I
dry of ideas right now.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know the ITF, and I don't know what's presented to them. But I think not a big thing, a small thing, and maybe having the documents as these process diagrams as an ASCII, and presenting just that, right? A couple of these, and say, we're going to be discussing this at this meeting. Please come along, is a good way of doing that. At the same time, Hank, as identifying a couple of people who we think will support the process through.
By the way, we do have the ASCII art, right? They are in the draft. They may not be the best ASCII art because these are complex diagrams, but we have that.
Yes.
Yeah, I fully support Hank that we should present it in the kind of remote attestation meeting we organize every 4 weeks on challenges of the complex scenarios, so that the people in the RATS community is more aware of this. And the more people understand and engage with it, the more acceptance happens to that. It seems that in the short amount of 30 minutes, we presented a lot of information, and the message didn't go through them. People didn't connect very well at that meeting. So we should keep engaging through the mailing list, through the presentation mode.
So maybe an initial post to the mailing list saying, here's the problem we're trying to address, with just a couple of paragraphs, and then a link to the document, for instance. That would be a start, right? And people can say, well, I don't think this is a problem. Or yes, I do see this is a problem, and maybe I'll have a look at the thing, right? But just pieces, nuggets of information that people can digest easily and then work out how to engage with. So I understand this problem from my point of view, in that I don't make it to enough of these meetings, and the learning curve to get back up to speed is high. But if I had just been presented with all of this stuff all in one go, with no prep, and frankly, if I didn't have any incentive to do the prep, and that's a problem as well, then I think it would be very difficult. So we're just trying to make life easier for people. And if we can make it easier for them, they'll probably go along with us, if they agree that we're doing something sensible.
I have to look at the idea again. I'm sorry that I'm so overloaded. It'll take me a while.
And it's really frustrating for Mark. I really get this, because he and this group
Yeah.
have worked very hard on this over a bunch of months, right? And we'd like to just be able to make it move forward, but it's just
yeah, and this is not my pet project. The ability to deploy at scale actually depends on it.
Yeah, I get that.
Right. So, and moving something like this forward without industry support is one of the more riskier, like it's a riskier strategy.
So again, industry support, we must remember, is in individual people at individual companies. So finding 4 or 5 different people at individual companies who will get behind this,
yes,
and who are ITF people, is absolutely key.
Right.
Yeah, there can be, you can have a mix. So like if you're like 3 well-known ITF players and 2 new ones that are then drawn into the gravity well, that's fine. Yeah, right. So I think, but if it's all like jumping in out of nothing with no context, then it looks like something to ward against. As like
Standard body, yeah, they have antibodies for this sort of thing, right?
yes,
Standard bodies
exactly.
are know how to deal with this sort of thing, and if we look like that sort of thing, we will get that treatment whether we deserve it or not.
Indeed, but we already have ID work going. We have a working repository going.
Yeah,
So that is
no
already,
problem.
I think, calming this immune system down. So the immune response down. And so,
Keep
but
convincing them.
yeah, again, but you're right. So if we can identify uh, interested parties and stakeholders well, like with we will work on this commitment. And Mike is right. So 5 is plenty for adoption. And there might be even other people just because now there's enough interest that okay, I'm reading this tool, looks good to me, and they might be, I'm in favor. It's just that you can get traction in the working group itself, which is ideal outcome. But
Yeah, and
having like
again, this is the sort of thing where it's there's a trust relationship, right? A transactional trust. So if I trust X and Y, that's enough for me to say, oh, it looks okay. I'll go with it, right?
well, we are at the moment, and this is a little bit of a not an issue, but we have no content format, right? So there's no identifier format. We have one Whimsy that is a URI, not not as helpful as we want. I want to say, um, and we don't have a candidate yet, if I understand correctly, right? So that is also something that might be a little bit of a conundrum. Like we have no, but Manu maybe has an idea.
Well, no, Mark, if you go back to that very first diagram, we have TWI in the middle of these three. I think that summarizes the problem that we have. Is that, and I've observed this. I went for 2 years, attended the meetings. I did come across as a crazy guy because I was trying to say, wait a minute, we need to approach this in a kind of a unified way. Literally, right? If you think credential is all about, identity, provenance is about chaining and having strong bindings, and attestation is this, the binding of the chip itself that enables you then to verify the workload and then to verify the cryptography that may run in the workload that enables the chaining. And so the issue is that we have the CCC in particular has this technology that enables us to rethink those three things together. And that's the challenge that we have. The IETF, I've heard it so many times, every time I go, is that the working groups get shaped just to fill the gaps of what already exists. So there's very little appetite to just wait a minute, to just think if we approach this in a different way, we could, make those things, work together better. Because gaps result, if you fill the gaps, you end up with a seam. And what we have here, the approach to TWI is kind of a unified approach that pull those things together. So I don't have a better idea except that, what I have observed from my, the 7, 8 meetings that I went to is that the rats people at least understand that everything starts with the chips, right, with the hardware. And so I do believe that we have, by growing out of rats, I think we have a better chance. I think the whimsy guys very much say, hey, it has to work everywhere with everything, which I agree with, right? Eventually it has to work with everything and everywhere. But we start at the layer underneath it. We start at the verified chips. And then the provenance, the Corim stuff, I think is kind of right now is a sideshow, but it's I mean, not a sideshow. I mean, from our perspective, we start touching on it because we start identifying those two things: the composite verifiers and chaining of chains of provenance. And so that's where those things touch. But I mean, the Corim guys are the rats guys, right? So this is I think where our home is. So my tendency would be to say, let's double down on the rights folks crowd. The whimsy guys, I think, are once we have the way of chaining things and the way of tying this to specific chips and verifiers and understand how that works, then we'll be able to bind any type of format, identifier
Yeah.
formats. It doesn't really
Whimsy,
matter.
a Whimsy working group engagement is actually almost entirely orthogonal to the engagement with rats, and there may be a separate informational draft we need to update there. So there was one presented 1.23, that one's probably expired by now, but it hasn't died, certainly in my mind, and I will continue pursuing, with the Whimsy working group, the idea that they need to work with confidential computing as well. But let's focus this discussion here specifically on what it is that we are doing to promote the sort of rats engagement. That is not about the format of the credential. It's about the fact that whatever format the credentials are in, it needs to come out of our interaction with the rats reference architecture.
Yes.
That's why they are, in fact, separate bubbles on this diagram. Like, you go talk to rats, then rats needs to give you whimsy or not whimsy. That doesn't matter. That's why I'm saying it's for instance whimsy. Could be something else. But the invariant is the claims in that credential. They need to not be low-level current rat style claims. And people need to understand that they're building something that customers are not going to be able to deploy, and that is a problem. And that I need to keep pushing that because they just keep digging a deeper hole.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more. It really is the problem, and I think I was seeing the mailing lists, arguing about the different roles and the separation of roles. At the end of the day, it's the lack of the rights group is not looking from the relying party perspective. That's the issue, is that it's a kind of it's disconnected from the end goal. The end goal is the relying party needs to be able to decide to proceed or not.
And standards people generally are not operational people, and therefore don't. I'm not going to say don't care, but that they're not generally business people or operational people, and therefore that's not typically their first starting point.
Yeah,
it's just the way it is. I'm going to drop, folks. If I can help, if there's something that my title can do and my background can do, please feel free to deploy me. I'm very happy to be deployed. I don't know the IETF folks particularly, but I have spent time in standards, so I kind of know how they work a bit. So if it would be helpful to deploy, I know I'm a title, but I do have, I can provide technical background as well if that's helpful. So
let's see, if folks in Google at Microsoft who build their verifiers, bringing their attention to this might be useful.
I don't know the people who build the verifiers, but I can certainly get in touch with them.
Yeah, and another way would be bringing
what I need to tell them.
Bringing this into the attestation SIG. I think it needs to be covered in the attestation SIG because those folks attend those meetings for sure.
Attestation SIG, but you're quite right. Please, if someone can make this 1 and 2 hours time, which I'm not going to make. In fact, I'm trying to get to change the time because I can never make that.
Changing the time is a very difficult thing. It was attempted twice.
I understand that. The question is whether I'm important enough. All right.
All right.
That's a good point, Mark. We should bring this into CCC attestation 6 to start with.
Yeah,
100%.
The presentation.
Thanks,
yeah.
All right. And Mike, we will come back to Manu and for example, an ARM colleague of Yogesh, for example, or Thomas Fossati, who was
tell me who I need to talk to, and I will send stuff to them. Not a problem.
Yeah. Okay. We will work on that.
All right. I'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, we'll make further progress, and then I'm going to contact the attestation SIG in the meantime and try and present there.
Thank you. Be well. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. See you all later. Bye-bye.
See you later.